I don't know why it surprises me, but it does. Like, it's not like it's only said one time in the Bible, and yet every time I come over it thoughtfully, every time I read a passage that contains it, and I'm fully engaged, it shocks me. It overwhelms me. It reminds me that something that has become trivialized in our world, something that is overlooked, even in our Christian contexts, is still shockingly central to what it is that we are doing in Jesus. What I'm talking about is love, the centrality of love, the importance of love. Paul says it in 1 Corinthians 13. Faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love. Paul writes about it in Colossians 3, that all of these things, from patience to kindness, it's all centered on love. Even in the fruit of the Spirit, where he's talking about it in Galatians 5, he lists love first: love, joy, peace, patience, because love helps contain it all. I don't know why it surprises me then when I come across a passage like John chapter 15, where Jesus is speaking to his disciples. He's giving some of his last parting words that stretches over 2 to 3 chapters, chapters 15, chapter 16, chapter 17, where Jesus is then arrested in 18 and crucified in 19. And typically what it is that you say as your final words are the things that matter to you most. And here in chapter 15, where Jesus is talking about the vine and the branches and the importance of remaining in him, of staying connected to him, this is what Jesus says in chapter 15, verse 9. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now, remain in my love. Remain in my love. I heard a preacher not too long ago talking about this verse and this insight. He said it this way. He says, isn't it interesting that Jesus doesn't say, remain in my commandments, remain in my obedience, remain in forgiveness, remain in peace? No. Jesus says, remain in my love. Why? Because if you remain in the love of Jesus, you will naturally move towards obedience. You will naturally move towards forgiveness. You will naturally receive a peace that passes our understanding. The problem is that typically we put one of those other things in the place of love and make Christianity all about that. For example, humility. There's this weird thing that's been happening. I mean, it's been happening for decades, but for some reason, inside of the Protestant churches, for some reason recently, it has really started to bother me. And it's this. Typically in a lot of the Protestant churches, and especially in a lot of, evangelical type churches, we talk about God's love, but in a weird way. We talk about it like this. Oh man, God loves us so much. And then we always try to smuggle in this phrase. Now, we don't deserve this love. We don't deserve it, and yet he gives it to us freely. And it never really bothered me until recently. My child said something to me that made me a bit concerned about this statement that we always say, that we don't deserve God's love. Now, I know Paul says it 2 or 3 times in the Bible, but it's in a different context, and he's doing it for a different reason. What happened to me was I was talking to my son, and he had a rough day. And I was helping him process it, trying to figure out what was going on in his heart and his emotions. And finally, we got to the end of a very long conversation where he finally came to the point of not just asking for forgiveness, but of also understanding, darn, that's not the way I want to move forward from here on out. And this is what he said to me. He's super emotional, super tender. And he got so overwhelmed with the way that I was treating him gently that he said this. He goes, Dad, I love you so much, and I just don't deserve to be your son. And he starts weeping. And as a father, I immediately said, no, do not say that. Don't say you don't deserve to be my son. Instead, let's just you and I celebrate the fact that I love you and you love me, and together we can do incredible things. I said, Robert, none of us deserve each other, but we have each other. Let's celebrate it. That next Sunday, whenever I heard this typical phrase, now God's love, he loves us, but it's not, we don't deserve it. My thought was, I wonder what God's thinking when he hears his children constantly reminding him that we don't deserve his love. My guess is he would have responded infinitely more tender than I even responded to Robert. I can see God from heaven going, no, wait a minute. Why do you think that it makes the love more intense when you remind me you don't deserve it? Stop it. Instead of trying to make the foundation of our relationship this weird definition of humility where you put yourself down, instead, make the foundation of our relationship my love. That doesn't need to be reminded of how much you deserve. Instead, it just needs to be embraced fully, completely, so that instead you can confidently say, I am my God's beloved. He loves me tenderly, and I am so incredibly grateful. In John 15:9, this is what Jesus had in mind. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. Make Jesus' love the center of your relationship with God. Not berating yourself or measuring yourself for what you deserve and not deserve, but instead fully embracing the fact that he, as he does in John 15, calls you friend, calls you child, calls you beloved. This next week, I challenge you to simply remain in God's love, to not question it, to not measure it, to not even articulate whether or not you deserve it. Instead, embrace it, for it is a gift. And do what it is that is really good on Christmas. Receive the gift well. I love you guys. Have a good week.